Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. We have reached the end of an era. Took a lot longer than I thought it would be due to procrastination, but here we are. The final episode of Fawlty Towers. Season 2, Episode 6, the 12th episode overall. And it's a fitting ender. It is Basil the Rat. Now, this episode has a very interesting story behind it because I think it was the last episode or the previous one I mentioned there were some behind the scenes issues involving a strike happening. Well, because of said strike, this episode was released 6 months after the previous episode, and the strike delayed shooting for a couple weeks, and this delay gave the cast several extra days to rehearse and refine the episode, their timing, which in comedy is important. With comedy, the two most important things are that it's one, that is funny, and two, the timing of the jokes. Because you have something that's funny, but your timing be a bit off, so it kills a little bit of the impact. But if you get the timing just right, it's a zinger. And here, the timing is right with a lot of the jokes, especially since this is a back and forth ping pong related episode due to the plot. As you can tell from the title already, this is going to be one of those ones. And the reason that's important to mention here, besides that, is that with the previous episodes, they were on such a time crunch that it was like getting there, get the timing down as best they can, and then go out there and shoot it. But here, they can get the timing down to where like, all right, we're good. Now we gotta start recording. All right, let's do this. Let's do this thing. The plot of the episode is that Fawlty Towers has been audited by a health inspector, and as you probably would guess, he has found multiple violations. Now, the introduction of the inspector is pretty funny, because Basil thinks it's just a random guest that's wandering, so he gets to his usual stick insulting the guy, being all sarcastic, but in the moment he finds out he's a health inspector, he starts his usual kiss butt routine until he finds out about the violations. And the health inspector informs him, "If these are not corrected post haste, I shall have to prosecute. You have 1 day." I think the funniest violation is that their water tank has 2 dead pigeons in it. There's a lot of other ones you're like, listen to, like, all right. And of course, once the chef's told, he's like, a lot of these kitchens have that, which I would not be surprised for a lot of the hole in the wall restaurants, like where I'm in, be a lot of the hole in the wall Mexican restaurants that would be true for. And he does kind of make a point. It does add a little bit to it, but you got to be careful because you don't want to eat something and then have a case of the runs or something worse. Especially with the dead pigeons, you don't want that to contaminate your water supply. Well, the Fawlty, Mr. Basil, is being all anal retentive and taking it seriously. He goes upstairs to tell Manuel, hey, we just got audited by the health inspector, we gotta do this. And he sees, for the first time, Manuel's pet hamster, which has been mentioned once in a previous episode, the Germans. And it turns out it's not a hamster, it is a rat. And because of all that, he's like, we got to get rid of this rat. You can't have a rat here. We're going to get kicked out by the health inspector. Which I understand, but it's like, the rat is in a cage inside a room. He's not in any of the other things. How is the help having a pet rat inside his own personal room a health violation? I just don't get it. Maybe it's something to do with how rats were seen in Britain when the movie was set. Maybe it's something that's still there. I don't know, but it just strikes me as something that is a little bit too what's the right way to word this? Too much of a power play on Basil's point, but you kind of see why he does it because he's Basil. But it just strikes me as like, why? Well, they make him get rid of the rat. He takes it to a friend at Polly's. And the next day things seem to be running well, other than Manuel being all upset. There is some humor involved when Basil takes the rat because Manuel is all, he take my pet, he take my pet. And the next day, Manuel's all down in the dumps, which Andrew Sachs does play this well, like, oh. But then we find out he got the rat back, and he put it in the shed outside. And I just love the way that scene's shot, where we actually see the camera in front as he comes in, Basil, Basil. And it turns out Manuel was an idiot, and instead of just putting the cage out there and all that, he let the rat out. And if you know anything about rats, one, they're very smart. But two, once you let them out of their cage, they're going to be running and exploring. And since he's on the Fawlty Tower grounds, what's he going to do? He goes into the restaurant. And the rest of the episode is Basil, Polly, and Manuel trying to get their hands on the rat. Very simple premise, and it carries throughout the rest of the episode. And it's them trying to make sure the guests don't see him, especially the health inspector. The major sees him, which that scene is funny because, with anything involving the major scene, something like that is fun. But then he gets a shotgun and he fires at him, which the health inspector hears, and he's like, I'm going to have to report this. This is a major violation. But they try to get the major to, like, don't say it was a rat. Say it was a starling. A starling. Got it. Anything involving the major like that. As you can expect, the health inspector does find out, but that's the ending gag of it. Would you kill for a rat? It's an obviously fake rat, which it's one part of the episode that has not aged well. It's like, that rat does not look good. The rest of the shots of the rat are pretty good because it's an actual rat, and those ones were filmed separately from the rest of it for obvious reasons. You're not going to actually film in front of a live studio audience with the real rat. I mean, even if you have the best trained rat in existence, it still has a mind of its own. There's that whole thing about show business, never work with animals and children. But certain animals you can. I mean, Everybody Loves Raymond had decent success working with Shamsky the dog. I mean, even getting him to answer to, beat it, Shamsky. Mm-hmm. But Basil the rat, yeah. Well, one of the running gags in the episode involves veal, where Basil has poisoned it trying to get the rat, and then the chef picks it up thinking it was just dropped, and them trying to figure out which piece of meat is poisoned. They think, oh, it's that one, it's good. The cat ate that one, the cat's fine, we'll use that one, just trim it. Basil sees the cat starting to throw up, and then them trying to go back, get the veal, yeah. it's like, I was like, you can imagine what the other people in the restaurant are thinking, like, what in the heck is going on here? And this place was recommended? It's like, no wonder our family did not recommend this place. It's like, it's one of those things, like, this would have been a funny moment for someone to actually see the rat. Of course, being the final episode, we never find out if Fawlty Towers gets shut down. But if you were to watch them in any order, like the VHS puts it in, it's like, yeah, they probably don't. And I'd have a feeling that they probably got fined but didn't get shut down. But that's open to interpretation whether you think that happens. Because as far as I know, there was never anything set after this other than like reunions where they talk about the show. But it would have been nice for them to do a years later episode of it showing that they're still running it. It'd be funny if Polly was still working there, Manuel still being there. Manuel, you've been doing this to me for 30 years. I'm sorry, Mr. Fawlty. Now, one interesting thing that Cleese did say about this episode is this stands out as one of the best episodes. I know he said that about a couple other ones, but here's his justification for here. There's no outside antagonist. I guess you can say that because the health inspector isn't really an outside antagonist once he makes his presence known because he's a guest at the hotel. So it's a true ensemble effort, and each cast member contributes equally to the farce. That is pretty true. All of them trying to get in through there, try to make sure the health inspector doesn't see the rat, and then in the end it all blows up in their face. And at the beginning, Mr. Carnegie, the health inspector, who's played wonderfully in the scenes he's in by John Quarmby, he reads off 18 health violations, of course one of which being that aforementioned 2 pigeons. The ending gag before the rat's revealed involves Basil listing off several cheeses to the health inspector, which is awfully similar to a certain Monty Python gag. The only thing that doesn't happen is that the health inspector or Basil don't threaten to shoot the other in the head, but considering that the rat shows up, I have a feeling Basil probably wishes he had a gun on hand so he could shoot the rat. Sad and senseless waste of rodent life. One little thing that Polly does say to cover up the fact that there's a rat in the hotel is she says ratatouille to cover up something that Manuel's saying, which even though they're not cooking it is a nice little cover. But it also makes sense considering that Basil is a seasoning you usually use in ratatouille. And of course this whole thing ratatouille with the rat, this is decades before the Disney film, so makes me wonder if someone on the creative staff for that movie was a fan of this show or not, or if it's just a coincidence that I'm making of my own volition. Now, another thing they mentioned to try to cover up something Emmanuel does while looking for Basil the rat is, they say, maybe some bomb scare. Which, of course, from John Cleese's perspective, is a reference to the hotel that inspired the show, but it's also a reference to the bomb scare tactics of the IRA, because they attacked English businesses as well as political targets. And of course, this would be a business, a local one, even though it's a seaside last resort, as John Cleese put it. Because even though it's Torquay, he based the whole place on Weston-super-mare. Because he was very happy that he was not there. Thank you. So it makes sense that they would want to target that place. But I think even the IRA would look at Fawlty Towers and go, nah, we're going to go someplace better. Even they have standards about where they're going to bomb. All in all, Basil the Rat is a pretty fun series finale episode. The jokes are on point, the camera work and the writing are spot on. The cast, due to that extra time they had to rehearse, their timing and their delivery and their location and their back and forth with each other work perfectly. The ending of the episode, it's the episode ending this deserved. It, like the end joke, and then it just slowly fades out. Like, that's the perfect way to end the show. Like I mentioned earlier, it would be interesting to see what happened years later as a one-off, but it's one of those things like you don't really need it, but it'd be nice. But I think Cleese and the others would rather do other projects. And this is definitely a show I recommend if you guys haven't gotten that already from the other episodes I've done of here. If you want, I believe there are clips of the show on YouTube somewhere. I think I even saw someone actually did the rips of the VHSs I have, so if you want to try to watch it while they're up there, go there. You're going to have to look up what episode order they're in, but you can really watch the episodes in any order because there's continuity, but it's loose continuity. It's like loose references, like the reference in another episode to Manuel's rat, and then here finally seeing it's a rat and not a hamster.